Hi, 7th grade drummers, Mr. Y here, obviously. While the winds and woodwinds and brass are doing their Keep It Green thing this week, I thought I'd give you guys an assignment out of the EE book. We're going to have you do 2 out of the 3 that the woodwinds and brass are doing. I'm going to have you do 108 technique tracks and also 113 staccato study. We're going to skip 110 chromatic crescendo because I don't think it really is very tricky for drummers, not really very applicable. But 108 and 112 are kind of cool. So check it out. 108 technique tracks is really a drum set part, really, of what you've got there. You've got 3 separate parts. The little X's up on top, or the ride cymbal part, that is just basically straight eighth notes all the way through. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that kind of thing all the way through. By the way, drummers, you'll see that I don't have a drum pad at home. I got caught when we were so rudely interrupted without a drum pad. I do have sticks, but I don't have a pad. So I'm going to be playing on my little table here. Please, if you're in a similar situation and you need to do that as well, get your parents' permission first before you start banging on the furniture. Okay? You don't want to be banging on something, really valuable or really important to your parents. All right, so technique tracks. The right hand ride cymbal part, like I said, just about the easiest thing ever. There are a couple of stops, places where it stops, actually, so be careful. In the 4th measure, for instance, those last 3 notes doesn't have it, and in the 8th measure also. But other than that, it's just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and all the way through. Kind of a simple piece of cake kind of thing. The bass drum part is actually even easier because it's the same exact thing for all 8 measures. You've got 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4. See if you can hear my foot there? And the right foot, I mean. So you've got 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, rest, 1 and 2 and 3, rest, all the way through, literally. It's always the same. So that's pretty easy. The snare drum part is actually pretty easy too. Most of the time it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4th measure, it does have a little bit of a snare drum fill. You have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. There's that and 4 and part right there. Okay, but other than that, it's all the same. Now, what I would suggest you do on a drum set part, if you're not familiar with doing all 3 parts at once, is take 2 of them at a time. I mean, obviously you could do 1 at a time too at first if you're really having a lot of trouble. Just work on the ride cymbal part, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But once you get all 3 parts separately down individually, really good, you can start to put 2 of the parts together. For instance, the ride cymbal part and the snare drum part. I'm going to use the snare drum as just my little book here, and the ride cymbal as my table. Can you see that okay? I guess that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 3. The snare drum part is a little bit different in that last measure too. I forgot about that. Then, if you want to, you can do just the bass drum part, for instance, and the ride cymbal part. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1. I don't know how that audio is coming through. I don't actually have a bass drum here. I'm just kind of kicking the floor. But then once you've got those 2 down, so how about snare and bass drum? That kind of thing. Once you've got all the different combinations put down, hi-hat and snare, snare and bass drum, hi-hat and bass drum too. Then take it really, really slow, like super slow motion, and try to put all 3 together. If you are lucky enough, by the way, to be to be home with a drum set, it's going to be a little easier here, but you don't need a drum set to do this. This is really what I call the imaginary drum set. In fact, you can practice this kind of thing without even sticks. I mean, the way I do the imaginary drum set is this. Ride cymbal right here, or hi-hat right here, your right hand. Okay, left hand is snare. Your foot is the kick drum, the bass drum. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3. 1, 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and everybody. On that very last measure, all 3 drums are on the same time on beat 3, so we have 1 and 2 and all right there. Okay, not really all that hard. It's kind of a simple drum set part. about as simple as it's possible to get at beginning drum set level, which is kind of cool. Okay, moving on to 113, staccato study. We have a fairly easy rhythm here. There's some 16th notes, but nothing too complicated in terms of the rhythm. There is a little complicated in terms of the dynamics, though. If you check it out, we start at piano at the very beginning with crescendo in the first measure. Now, it doesn't say when that ends, but you do have a second dynamic in measure 5 that's forte. So you go from piano all the way up to forte at number 5. And then from 5 to the end, there's a decrescendo. You can see in measure 5, there's a decrescendo. And at the very end, it's back down to piano. So it's basically one big long wave. It gets louder and louder and louder, and then quieter and quieter and quieter, all the way to the end. Okay? The rhythms here, you can see there is a sticking pattern. We have right, left, 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 stop. Sorry, the last one is right, left, right, left. Okay? Similar rhythm on the second half. It's a kind of a right-hand lead part. Right, left, right, 1 and a 2 and 3 and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 and a 2 and 3. The rhythm here, not too hard. The first couple of measures, you have the 1 and a 2 and 3 and 1 and a 2, the 1 and a thing. In the third measure, the 16th notes are at the beginning of the beat, though. So remember, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and in that measure. Okay? Let me do the whole thing all the way through. That'd be about right. Let's go 80. Let's go 80 beats a minute. See if we can do that, okay? Again, I'm going to start out really, really piano at the very beginning, get to forte by the middle, and then back down to piano at the end, okay? 1 and ready. 1 and a 2 and 3 and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 and 2 E and a 3. 1 and a 2 and 3 and 1. You can see how it's one big arc. It starts really quiet, gets louder in the middle, and then goes back down all the way to the end. Having control of your drumsticks is much more difficult and much better at the piano level. Anybody can play loud. Okay, I could teach an orangutan to play loud, but to be able to play with a quiet, controlled sound, obviously, is a lot harder. Once in a while, if you get really, really quiet on the drums, in fact, if I get down to double piano, I'll miss the drum. I'll go to play and start to pick it up too fast and not actually hit the drum. That's kind of a hazard of playing double piano. And as you get better, you'll do that less and less often, of course, because you'll get a good feel for how you can play really, really piano or double piano. Okay, good luck with it.